Chapter 39. The 1980s in the East and the Mideast. India after partition. Once India and Pakistan had been partitioned, India held its first elections. Gandhi, who had led the fight for freedom for so many years, was dead. In India's first elections, Gandhi's friend and ally, Jawaharlal Nehru, became the prime minister. Under Nehru, India ripped off the very last rags of European power. France, which still held territories in India, agreed to give this land back. Portugal, which also claimed Indian land, refused. But in 1961, soldiers from the Indian Army marched into the Portuguese territories and took them back by force. Not long after, Prime Minister Nehru died. He had served as the first Prime Minister of an independent India for 13 years. 2 years later, Nehru's daughter, Indira, became Prime Minister in his place. Indira had married a man whose last name was Gandhi, so she went by the name Indira Gandhi. But she was no relation to Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi is a common name in India, a little bit like Baker or Johnson in some parts of the United States. Between 1966 and 1980, Indira Gandhi battled to keep her position as the first female Prime Minister of India. In one of her addresses to the Indian government, she quoted a popular Indian song. "We are the women of India. Don't imagine that we are flower maidens. No, we are the sparks in the fire." Indira Gandhi needed the energy of a spark to govern India. After independence, India went through difficult times. People lost their jobs. Many were hungry. Indira tried to make India's farms more productive. She convinced the United States to help India out with money and with exports of grain to feed the hungry of India. In 1971, when she had been Prime Minister for 5 years, Indira had to deal with Pakistan. At the time of partition in 1947, Pakistan had been divided into two parts, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. But it was never a very good arrangement because the two halves of this one country lay on either side of India, separated from each other by thousands of miles. The government offices and the army headquarters were in West Pakistan. As time went on, East Pakistan became poorer and poorer, while West Pakistan prospered. In 1970, East Pakistan announced that it wanted to be free from West Pakistan. West Pakistani troops marched east, ready to occupy East Pakistan. In the fighting that followed, millions of civilians from East Pakistan, afraid of being caught in the war, left their country and crossed over into India. West Pakistan was afraid that India might sympathize with these refugees and join with East Pakistan against West Pakistan. So West Pakistani planes dropped bombs on 8 Indian airports. Now Indian military planes couldn't use those airports to launch attacks on West Pakistan. Instead of stopping India, the bombing made India angry enough to join in the war. Under Indira Gandhi's direction, Indian troops allied themselves with East Pakistan and drove the West Pakistani soldiers out. Now East Pakistan could declare itself independent from West Pakistan. It changed its name to Bangladesh. West Pakistan became known simply as Pakistan. The people of India gave Indira Gandhi most of the credit for success in the Pakistani war. She became more and more popular. But then, two catastrophes struck India. The first came in 1984. For several years, Sikhs in India had been asking for their own independent country. Hindus governed India. The Muslims had gotten Pakistan. Now the Sikhs, who were neither Muslim nor Hindu, wanted to control their own part of India, an area called the Punjab. Sikhs who believed in one God and followed 5 holy rules of life had once been warrior princes. For many centuries they had served as the royal bodyguard for India's emperor because of their skill at fighting. When India became an independent country with a prime minister, Sikhs kept their traditional job. They now acted as the prime minister's bodyguard. When the Sikhs in the Punjab began to ask for control of their own land, Indira agreed to make Punjabi, the language Sikhs spoke among themselves, the official language of the Punjab. But this made the Hindus who also lived in the Punjab angry. So Indira divided off a separate area in the Punjab just for Hindus to live in. This angered the Sikhs. They wanted all of the Punjab for themselves. They began to fight with the Hindus, not just in the Punjab, but all through India. One group of warlike Sikhs went to the Golden Temple in the holy city of Amritsar and made it their headquarters. By tradition, the Golden Temple was off limits to Indian police because it was a religious shrine. The Sikhs who were using the Golden Temple as their headquarters started to make terrorist attacks on Indians and then retreated to the Golden Temple, sure that the police would not come after them. Indira ordered the Golden Temple invaded. On June 5th, 1984, Indian Army soldiers stormed into the Golden Temple to fight against the terrorists hiding there. Nearly 1,000 Sikhs were killed. Indira's advisor suggested that she might want to get rid of her Sikh bodyguard, since they might be angry with her over her treatment of other Sikhs. Indira refused. She insisted that her bodyguard was trustworthy. She was wrong. On October 31st, 1984, 2 of the Sikh guards killed the Prime Minister as they walked with her to her office. A month later, a second catastrophe hit the country. An American company called the Union Carbide Corporation had built a factory in the center of India at a city called Bhopal. At its factory, Union Carbide made pesticides, chemicals to kill insects on crops and grasses. Just after midnight on December 3rd, 1984, poisonous gases began to leak out of the storage tanks at the Union Carbide factory. No one in Bhopal knew what was happening. At first, some people thought the Sikhs were to blame again. But what was to blame was a faulty tank at Union Carbide. 27 tons of a poison called methyl isocyanate escaped from the tank. According to Union Carbide, at least 3,000 people died that night from the poisonous gases. People from Bhopal say that the number was much greater, that as many as 15,000 died. No one knows exactly how many people died later from sicknesses caused by the gases, but at least another 150,000 people, and maybe over 500,000, were made horribly sick by the gases. Thousands never recovered. The Bhopal gas leak was the worst industrial disaster, a disaster caused by factories or manufacturing, in all of history, before or since. Even now, over 20 years later, the ground and water at Bhopal are still full of poison. Union Carbide never cleaned the mess up. Indian investigators blamed the gas leak on sloppy safety procedures and said that Union Carbide had not made sure that the storage tanks were secure because it would have cost too much money. None of the warning systems or safety systems at the plant were actually working at the time of the leak. Union Carbide, which is now part of an even bigger American company called Dow Chemical, insisted, and still insists, that the Bhopal tragedy had been caused by sabotage. Someone had deliberately arranged for the gas leak. The highest court of Bhopal demanded that the American CEO come to Bhopal and take part in a court hearing. He refused. He is still considered a fugitive by Indian law, even today. And even today, 20 years later, many groups of protesters still campaign for justice for Bhopal. Iran and Iraq.
Okay, so now that that is done, I'm going to bring this into here so I can show you guys this. I have emailed you guys this outline right here, right from the outline, India after Pakistan. Okay, so I have given you this via email. So what you are going to do on a separate sheet of paper is you are going to summarize what happened in this chapter using this outline. Okay, each of these should be 1 paragraph. And I want you to give me a summary with complete sentences and good handwriting. Okay, so that is your assignment for chapter 39.